we are going to be looking at this class, which is entitled Plagues, Fires, and Remembrance. And Plagues, Fires, and Remembrance really came out of the idea of Lag BaOmer, and we're going to see what that means, but we're going to go through this story tonight. It is a historical story, it is a traditional story, and we're going to also look in what is the context of this story in our lives as well, and how it relates to us and who we are as a Jewish people. So we're really going to go through this whole kind of winding road, hopefully today, and through that process, we'll explore the topic of Lag BaOmer. So with that being said, those of you who have taken classes with me know how much I love my PowerPoints. For those who are new, I'm going to share a PowerPoint and I'm going to explain how you can see me simultaneously as well as the other participants while also seeing the PowerPoint. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get that up there. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
So if you also want to see me, at the top you'll notice a green strip that says Yael Weinstein sharing, and right next to it in a black thin button is a view options. You can go ahead and select the view options and choose side-by-side mode, and you can see both my screen as well as the PowerPoint at the same time. So is everybody good?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. So Plagues, Fires, and Remembrance are collective DNA triggered during COVID-19. What does that really mean, right? So we have to start with, what is our collective DNA? Well, our collective DNA is our memory, right? So what is memory? Like if I ask you the term, what is memory? What does memory mean to you?
What we've recalled in the past.
Okay, what we recall in the past. What else is memory?
Things are important to your life, things that were important to your parents and grandparents, and then thus it's important to you too.
Right.
Connection to generations.
So collective memory is that connection to generations, right? But individual memory, the concept of individual memory is it builds up who you are as a person, right? Without your memories, the question is, who are you? If you have amnesia, what question are you asking yourself? You're asking, who am I? So if we have collective memory amnesia, the question is, who are we, right? But if you have your memory, then you understand who you are and the building blocks and those moments in your life that built who you are as a person. So too with collective memory, if we know what they are, it builds up of what we know about who we are, right? So my question for you is, I have some pictures on this screen. What do you see here? What are the pictures that you see here?
Megillat Esther.
Okay, so we have Megillat
Talmud and the Sefer Torah.
The Sefer Torah. What else did you see?
Megillat Esther.
Okay. What else?
And a page of the Talmud.
A page of the Talmud, and what else?
The wall,
yeah.
Western Wall.
The Kotel, and one other thing.
As somebody said, the Western Wall.
One other thing.
The menorah.
The menorah. Okay, so we have a Chanukah, which is the
Megillah we have.
Right, so we have these things. So let's start with the Torah. What is the basis of the Torah in the collective memory of the Jewish people? What is the place that it has in our collective memory or our collective DNA?
You're talking about the Torah?
Yeah.
The whole basic beginning of the Jewish people.
So it's the beginning, right? It's Bereshit. Bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created land and earth. But in the beginning, the Torah created us as the Am Yisrael, as the people of Israel, right? And we have our stories and our laws, and we have the history of who we are. And the Torah was then expanded into the Tanakh, And the Tanakh is the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim added to the Torah, right? So you had the prophets and the writings added to the Torah that further added to our memory, that added this kotel, right, to the story, because in the Second Temple, we had the kotel, and the kotel is literally the western wall of the outermost part, right, of the temple. It's actually not even part of the temple wall itself. It's the outer wall surrounding the temple. And so what does that represent? What does the kotel represent for us? If it represents the Beit HaMikdash, right, the holy temple, what is the collective memory of this temple for us?
I see it as being a time of prosperity with the kings, with the temple, center of Judaism in those days.
Right, in those days. And when you think of the kotel today, what does it represent for you? When you go to the kotel, go ahead, Lori.
Spirituality.
Okay, so spirituality. What else?
I have the connection to our old history through this.
To all of our history, right? To all those people who have come before and continue to come and place notes in the kotel.
Right.
Why do you place notes in the kotel? Because who are you talking directly to?
To God.
To God at the kotel, right?
Mhm.
It's a very spiritual and emotional place that connects us. Okay, now, why Megillat Esther? Why do I have Megillat Esther here for our collective memory?
I'm sorry, what is that?
So that's the Megillah of Esther, the story for Purim.
Oh,
From-
okay.
I
Thank you.
can stop. Okay, sorry, Lori.
Go ahead, Susan.
Well, it represents a diaspora. It's a story that took place outside of Israel. Our
Correct.
connection, our journey away from the land of our, our heritage, and a very important part of that segment of our journey.
Beautiful. And go ahead, Tommy.
My feeling also, it represents a lot of, I don't like to see Judaism through this eye, but as they say, even later on, in every generation, someone wanted to destroy us. And that's a book that really represented, and we still survive and still flourish and so on.
We still survive and we still flourish, and we still have moments where we feel like we want to be hidden like Esther, and where we have to stand up and be proud like Mordecai, right? Like these are those moments, these ebb and flow in the Jewish cadence and the Jewish history, right? Okay. Chanukiah. What is it? Why do we have the Chanukiah, which is a type of menorah? It's the type of menorah you use for Hanukkah specifically. So a menorah has 6 branches with the shamash, which is the servant candle, and with the Chanukiah, you have the 8 for the actual 8 days of Hanukkah and the 8-day miracle. So what is the point of the Chanukiah? Why is that here, do you think?
Well, it was originally the symbol of God's presence. It was the issue that was needed to always be lit, because that was a representative of God's presence. And it has come down through the temple, through Hanukkah, through the adornments that we have in a sanctuary. It's a symbol that it represents our religion in many ways. We see it on coins, and it's a very shall we say, a very strong symbol for our religion.
It's a very strong symbol, right? You see it and you know. What does it represent? Does it represent anybody else? No. Right? It's not like a Khamsa that can represent Muslim lands and Jewish and Jews and Islam. It's a menorah is solely what? Jewish. You know when you see a menorah or a Chanukiah that it's a Jewish experience, right? All right, last page. Ed, you said what it is. It's the Talmud. Tell me about it.
I mean, the Talmud, well, I mean, to be, exact, the Talmud basically contains the Mishnah, which was written around 200 in the Common Era, and the Gemara, which was sort of the rabbinic discussions on the Mishnah, which is about 300 years after that, and about 500, I guess, is when it was redacted. But basically, that is the basis of rabbinic rules, rabbinic laws. You know, when you go to rabbinical school, that's really what you're studying. You're studying essentially the Talmud.
Right. So people call us the people of the book. So often when we hear ourselves defined as the people of the book, we think the Torah, but really the people of the book are the people of the Talmud. The Talmud is what keeps us knowing what our laws are and evolution of our laws and telling us that we can evolve our laws as long as we base it off of something that comes before, right? It is the basis of all the laws that we follow now, which is based off of the Torah, right? So you have two bases, two foundations, two levels of foundations and layers, and they build upon themselves. And you have two types of Talmuds. You have the Yerushalmi Talmud and you have the Bavli Talmud. The Yerushalmi Talmud comes from Jerusalem, right? Eretz Yisrael, or the land of Israel. The Bavli Talmud comes from Babylonia. So it's also called the Babylonian Talmud. So you have these two types of Talmuds that represent who we are as a people. And it's a bunch of, like, the way I like to describe what the Talmud is essentially a bunch of rabbis who are not even necessarily living at the same time, arguing with each other over issues that are relevant in their lives. And then through them, we learn how to argue with ourselves and with other generations in order to come to the right basis for Jewish law and Jewish halacha and Jewish minhag being Jewish traditions that fits the new realities of the lives we live in today, right? Because every generation is dealing with new realities based off of the technology, based off of where you're living, based off of the law of the land. And so the Talmud teaches us how to be Jews. If the Torah made us Jews, the Talmud teaches us how to be Jews, okay? So when you think of it in this way, what makes our collective memory is all these things that build into who we are as a people. They're the things that teach us who we are. They're the stories that teach us who we are. They're the stories that tell us why it matters to be who we are. And they're woven into the fabric of the lives not only of these stories, but the stories of our ancestors, our grandparents, our parents, and then our stories will be woven into the pattern for our children as well, and for their children. And if you think about it, the memory creates this chain that goes from year after year after year, generation after generation, and creates and defines who we are as a people. Now the question becomes, when these things fade, what happens to our collective memory? What happens to our collective memory when these things fade? Do we fade also with it? Do we need these things to maintain who we are as a people? And what the story of Lag BaOmer, in many ways, is the story of memory and the story of forgetting. It is the story of building up a holiday that is based off of remembering moments in our collective memory. And it is also the story of how it has been forgotten and how we can reclaim it, and how this time period of COVID-19 can help us reclaim it. So are you ready to learn about Lag BaOmer now? Okay, does anybody have any questions before I continue? All right, wonderful. So Lag BaOmer comes from, Lag literally comes from Lamed Gimel, and Lamed Gimel is a numeric value, okay? And the numeric value of Lag BaOmer is 33. Lamed is for 30, and Gimel is 3. So literally it's 33. So Lag BaOmer is literally the 33rd day in the Omer. And the Omer is this counting period that we learn about from the Tanakh that teaches us that we're supposed to be counting 49 days, 7 complete weeks, until the 50th day, the 50th day being Shavuot. We start on the second night of Pesach, so that would be the second Seder for those of us who live in the diaspora, all the way 49 days, the day before Shavuot, and then on Shavuot we celebrate the receiving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. So why is this 33rd day Lag BaOmer. We're going to discover as we talk about it today, and we're going to see what that means to our collective memory and to who we are as a people and why we remember this stuff. But interestingly enough, Lag BaOmer should technically be Lag LeOmer, because if you read in the Siddur, the formulation for the counting of the Omer is Hayom Yom blank, the number, LeOmer. So technically, for the 33rd day of the Omer, you would actually say Hayom Shloshav Ushloshim Yom Shehem Arba Shava'ot V'Chamishim Yamim LeOmer. So today is the 33rd day. It is 4 weeks and 5 days LeOmer, of the Omer. But we don't say that. What we say is BeOmer. And the reason that we say BeOmer is because of a rabbi who is known as the acronym of RIMA, which is Moses Isserlis, and I never say his name correctly. And he was a very famous rabbi who came up with the idea that basically for the Ashkenazi tradition, that it is in the Omer. There's something unique about this day. There's something special about this day. This is not the normal day of the Omer. It is BeOmer, in the Omer, okay? So we know that it is special and it's unique because it doesn't have the normal formulation. Now, interestingly enough, the Jews from Spain, so the Sephardic Jews, actually still say Lag LeOmer, even though the Ashkenazim say Lag BaOmer. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So now that we know what it is, in the sense of the name, that we are very creative and we just called it the 33rd day in the Omer, let's actually learn what Lag BaOmer is. Nancy, do you mind reading for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
They said Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students from Givat to Antipatris, and all of them died in one period because they did not treat each other with honor.
So what do we know already? So we're in Yavmot 62b. I should explain what that is. We're in the Talmud. So we just learned what the Talmud is, and now we're actually in part of the Talmud. We're in one of the tractates of the Talmud, which is called a Maseket. And we're on page 62b. So there's a 62a and there's a 62b, and we're in verses 9 through 11. So we're not in the Mishnah, we're actually in the Gemara. So we're in the time frame that is being written right now is between 200 and 500 CE, right? So we know this is, but they're talking about Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva did not live between that time period. So they're actually talking about, they're recounting a story from the past. So Rabbi Akiva lived during the Bar Kockba Revolt. So he lived actually during the 130s CE. And and he is one of the most famous rabbis. Who knows who Rabbi Akiva is? Does anybody know who Rabbi Akiva is? I know Edward does. He's smiling and laughing. Susan, go ahead.
There's a lot of stories circulating around Akiva. He was illiterate until he was 40 years old. There's a lovely, I don't know if you have time, but there's a lovely midrash or a story that he saw a water falling on a stone, and it would drip, drip, drip until it made a hole. And he got the inspiration that if water can constantly drip and make a hole in a stone, then he could have the ability to begin studying at a ripe old age of 40.
There you go.
He had a wonderful wife who supported him, and he went off and became one of the outstanding rabbis of our time, and a tragic end to his life. Many, many stories regarding Akiva.
Right, and Rabbi Akiva is one of the most famous rabbis in the entire memory of Jewish history, right? And there's many, many stories of him and what he did and who he is. And many times, even if you don't know about other rabbis, you have heard about Rabbi Akiva. So what does this tell us, Nancy? What you read, how many pairs are there?
12,000.
12,000, which means how many students actually were there?
My gosh, 24,000.
4,000.
So we have 24,000
Incredible.
students, right?
Yeah.
And when they're saying from Givat to Antipatris, what do you know immediately the term Antipatres, is that an Israeli name? No.
Sounds Greek.
It's Greek, right? So it's a Greek name. So these students are widespread. It's not like they're all put together. And all of them died in one period because they did not teach each other with honor. So we know two things from this sentence, right? That all of them died in one time frame, right? And the reason that they died, according to they, right, who is telling us the story, is because the students did not behave properly to each other, right? This is the reason. Now, we don't know if the reason is true, right? Like, that's like saying right now that people are dying of COVID-19 because of God's wrath, or that people are dying of COVID-19 because, you know, God wants us to do something better, right? Because we're not treating each other with kindness. That's the example. But let's continue reading. Nancy, do you mind continue reading?
Sure. And the world was desolate until Rabbi Akiva came to our rabbis in the south and taught them. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosei, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shamoah. They established Torah at that moment.
Okay, so what happens? So all of these students die, and what does Rabbi Akiva need to do? He needs to start anew. Okay, he's starting from square one. And they established Torah at that moment. What does that mean? That the collective memory, the significance of Torah is being brought back into the Jewish life because it has been lost with those 24,000 pairs. And this one man is recreating it brick by brick by brick, or letter by letter by letter, teaching the Torah at that moment, right? To reestablish that Torah. And can you finish reading this particular text?
Sure. He taught, they all died between Pesach and Shavuot. Rav Hama bar Abba, and some say Rav Hia bar Avin, said, they all died a bad death. What is that? Rav Naaman said, askera, choking, and diphtheria.
So now we have a different thing, right? Now we go forward, and the rabbis are, so the rabbis, the interesting thing about the Talmud, for those who have never read the Talmud, is it's not always the most clear, right? There are, and it doesn't always stay on track. It's like reading the Talmud is like talking sometimes to somebody who's like jumping from one place to the other, except you have many somebodies jumping from one place to the other, because the way it was redacted is that it's all of a certain theme, but sometimes they go down rabbit holes, right? And then they come back, and then they go down another rabbit hole, and then they come back and they go down another. So the beginning of the text teaches us that they died in one period, and the final text and the end of the text teaches us that not only did they die in one period, between Pesach and Shavuot is that period, right? So during the Omer is when they died. But what did they die of? Askera. And it's translated as choking and diphtheria, but if you read later rabbis, they say it's a plague. It was a plague that killed 12,000 pairs. So that's where that's why this class started out with plagues. Because Lag BaOmer is a time that we're going to see that comes related to this Omer period of these plagues. Okay, so now we're going to our next text, which comes from the Babylonian Talmud, but this time we're in the Tractate of Shabbat. And Sandra, is it Sandra or Sandra?
Sandra.
Sandra, do you mind reading for us, please?
Oh, no problem. Our rabbis taught Askera comes into the world because of food meant for tithing. Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Yossi, said, because of Lashon Hara, evil speech.
Okay, so now we get an explanation of Askera. So one of the explanations that the rabbis tell us is because of food, right? That something happened with food for tithing, and maybe they didn't tithe it properly and they got sick. We don't know, right? And then another rabbi says the reason is because of lashon hara, or bad speech, or gossip. Evil speech is like loosely translated into gossip and stuff, right? So what are the rabbis trying to do is they're trying to make sense of the plague. And how many of us have sat around, maybe during COVID-19, trying to make sense of why the heck are we stuck in our houses, and why did this happen, and where did this happen? And of course, during this time period and in this day and age, the reasons are, well, scientifically, did somebody eat a bat? Was their science experiments gone wrong? And then there are others who actually have reasons behind it that are still that God made something happen. But so the Talmud is trying to understand the reasoning behind it. Okay, so now we know that the 24,000 students passed. They passed of this plague. They passed during the time of the Omer, which is between Passover and Shavuot. And now we know that they think that the plague happened for reasons that they were not taking care of themselves as a people. All right. So now let's go on to another text. It's the Shulchan Aruch, which is based off of Jewish law of the Talmud, but written much, much later during the Middle Ages. And there's many versions of the Shulchan Aruch. This is the Orach Chaim version. And Lori, do you mind reading for us?
It is customary not to get married between Pesach and Shavuot until Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day, because during that time the students of Rabbi Akiva died. However, to do Erushim and Kiddushin, engagement and betrothal, is okay, and even for Nisin, marriage. If someone did so, we do not punish him. Rima, however, from Lag BaOmer onwards, all that is permitted. I can't say it. Budracham, Beit Yosef, and Minhagim.
Perfect. Okay, stop right there. All right, so what we're told right now is we're given the first don't of Lag BaOmer, okay? So the first don't of before Lag BaOmer, the Omer period, is you don't get married. So in Jewish tradition, the most famous time of the year, so you know how like in the non-Jewish calendar, the most famous time of the year to get engaged and married is Valentine's Day, right? So the most famous time of the year to get married in Jewish tradition is Lag BaOmer. It's Lag BaOmer, right? You want a wedding on Lag BaOmer, and if you can have a wedding on Lag BaOmer on Tuesday, like the stars have aligned, because Tuesday night Lag BaOmer is like beautiful, right? It's beautiful. So we learn that it's okay to get engaged, although now Irusin and Kiddushin and Nisuin are all together in the marriage ceremony in Judaism, but back then they used to be separate times. And you're not supposed to be punished if you do this. You shouldn't do it, but it's not like such a bad thing that you would be punished for doing this, right? Now, what's the reasoning behind this? Why are we not getting married?
We're in mourning.
We're in mourning. So what else is not customary to do during Lag BaOmer is the next set. So go ahead and read that, Lori.
It is customary not to cut one's hair until Lag BaOmer, since it is said that this is when they stopped dying.
So who stopped dying?
I guess all
12,000 pairs of students.
The 12,000 pairs of students stopped dying on Lag BaOmer, and so it is said that because they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer, we are celebrating on that day. We can finish our mourning and start and celebrate. And we're not just finishing the mourning and not celebrating, we're actually going to find joy in this occasion, right? That they stopped dying. And some say that the joy is also to bring about the idea that the Torah is being reestablished. So it's not just that they stopped dying, but that Rabbi Akiva went out and found new students to teach and impart wisdom to and keep our tradition alive. So in many ways, what people say is Lag BaOmer is about bringing our tradition back to life.
Also, however, if I'm not mistaken, though, it's also customary to have a haircut on Rosh Chodesh ER.
Yeah.
Yes, so it is Rosh Chodesh. You're allowed to do that, but the bigger time is obviously Lag BaOmer, and
No question, correct.
absolutely. So people traditionally will start shaving on Lag BaOmer, so they don't shave before Lag BaOmer. And then the haircut is a really interesting thing. So the haircut, there's a tradition called an upshurin in Jewish tradition. And an upshurin is when you cut the boy's hair for the first time when they're 3 years old. And there's different reasons behind it. Some superstitions say the reason is because you want to hide the boy from Lilith, who would come and steal the children away and kill the child. So it was like like protect the children from evil things that could happen to them, and that boys were more wont to be stolen than girls. So that would be a way of explaining death of a child before the age of 3. So it was seen as a sign of protection. However, what's really interesting is that there is a Hebrew word that is called halakha, that is how you refer to the cutting of the hair for the children. And it's really interesting because it actually is very similar to an Arabic word. And I'm going to read the Arabic word so I get it correctly. Get it correct. The Arabic word is akika. And akika is performed at the birth of a child to cut their hair for good luck. And what's really fascinating is this sometimes is done later on in life. And during that time period, you would actually weigh and donate the hair. So you know how like people donate their hair for like what's it called, like wigs, yeah, like
what the group is called.
Exactly. So
Locks for love.
Yeah, exactly, like locks for love and stuff. So interestingly enough, back then in those days, like people would actually weigh the hair and give gold and silver in donations based off of how much their hair weighed. Which is a really fascinating thing. And they think it came actually from these Islamic traditions that were brought into the Jewish tradition through this concept. And it's really fascinating to see how it then got put into Lag BaOmer, that this celebration is a time to be excited. So there's actually Jewish tradition in weighing your hair, cutting your hair, and donating your hair, which is a really fascinating thing. But so hair cutting is one thing. You're also not supposed to listen to live music or perform with musical instruments during the time of the Omer until Lag BaOmer. You're not supposed to dance. You're not supposed to wear new clothing. And you're not supposed to, interestingly enough, they say, recite the Shechianu during the weekdays, although there is a debate of whether that's true or not. So Ramban, not to be confused with Rambam, actually says you can say the Shechianu, that the Omer should be more joyous and more like a Chol Moed time frame. But other rabbis say that you shouldn't say the Shechianu because it's a time of semi-mourning because of the 12,000 pairs that did perish and everything. So it really just depends on which rabbi, right? A lot of Judaism is which rabbi says which thing, and which rabbi's voice ends up being listened to for that particular thing. And sometimes there's many rabbis who are listened to. However, it was determined that these were the traditions that aside from the Shechianu, that everybody agreed on, that you don't get married, you don't cut your hair, you don't shave, you don't listen to music, you don't dance, you don't wear clothing. And on Lag BaOmer, what happens? You get to essentially have a party. And what's the party that you have?
Getting married, it's the marriage.
So you get married. If you're going to get married, you can get married. What else?
A bonfire.
A bonfire. So that's where the fires come in. So we have a bonfire celebration, and some people say it's in relation to the next story we're about to read. But bonfires are a really big way of very festive. Fire is very important in Jewish tradition and Jewish memory, right? So we use fire for lighting candles. We use fire for lighting Shabbat candles to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. We light it for Hanukkah candles to remember the miracle of Hanukkah. We light it for yard site to remember those who we love who have passed. So candles and flames have a very strong significance. So imagine a bonfire and the scope of a bonfire, what it's meant to impart in terms of the memory to us. And that brings us to the remembrance piece. So now we're going to go to the remembrance piece. Linda, do you mind reading we're in the Babylonian Talmud again, Shabbat, 33b. And this is a longer story, so we'll break it up who's reading and everything. But if you don't mind starting, that would be awesome. Oh, let's take you off of mute.
Susan didn't take me off. Susan's fault. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yoshi and Rabbi Shimon are sitting, and Rabbi and Yehuda, son of convert, sat beside them. Rabbi Yehuda opened and said, "How pleasant are the actions of the nation and the Romans as they establish marketplaces, establish bridges, establish bathhouses."
So what do we know? So Rabbi Yehuda is a fan of the Roman Empire. So he's like, this is great, right? It's like me being a fan of the United States. This is fantastic. We have movie theaters and we have swimming places and we have Disney worlds. I mean, it's fantastic, right? All right. So what does Rabbi Yossi? What does Rabbi Yossi do, Linda?
Let's see, where am I? Oh, yeah, there we go. Rabbi Yossi was silent. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai responded and said, everything that they established only for their own purposes. They established marketplaces, to place prostitutes in them, bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect taxes from all who pass over them.
So what is Rabbi Yochai's, what does Shimon ben Yochai think?
He said it's only for their own benefit.
Yeah, it's like, are you kidding me? Like, this is ridiculous, right? Like, this is awful. Like, Rome is a horrible place, right? Different perspective. Right. Same situation, different perspective.
Different perspective, right.
Okay.
Yehuda, son of converts, went and I'm trying to read through this yellow here. Went and related their statements. That's okay. Went and related their statements to his household, and those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the monarchy. They ruled and said, Yehuda, who exalted us, shall be exalted. Yossi, who remained silent, shall be exiled to the city of Zippori. And Simon, who denounced the government, shall be killed. Wow.
All right, so the one who disclosed the conversation got rewarded. The one who did not defend the Romans was exiled away. And the one, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who denounced the government, was supposed to be killed. Okay, so that's the setup of what happens next. Ed, do you mind reading what happens next?
No problem. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and his son, Rabbi Elazar, went and hid in the study hall. Every day, Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring them bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. When the decree intensified, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "Women are easily impressionable, and therefore there is room for concern lest the authorities torture her and she reveal our whereabouts."
Okay, so they go into hiding, right? And they go into hiding where? In the study hall. They go into hiding in the Beit Midrash. And what ends up happening is the wife brings them food, right? And then one day he's like, oh, like it's getting like they're trying to find me. It's getting worse. Oh no, I'm going to die if I trust her. We should not trust her.
Trust our wives.
Right? Right. Yeah. Don't listen to this. Right. So don't trust our wife because women are impressionable. Right. All right. Lori, do you mind reading?
They went and they hid in a cave. A miracle occurred, and a carob tree was created for them, as well as a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and sit covered in sand up to their necks. They would study Torah all day in that manner. At the time of prayer, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray. And then they would again remove their clothes afterwards so that they would not become tattered. They dwelled in the cave for 12 years.
Okay, so they lived for 12 years in a cave, and how did they survive in the cave?
Sand up to their necks. They studied Torah all day.
Oh, they ate carob.
Ate carob, and they drank from this miracle carob
water.
tree, and they drank water, right, which sustained them. The water in the carob tree sustained them for 12 years, and it was a miracle, right? A nes gadol, right? A great miracle. And they studied for 12 years and prayed, and that's all they did, right? And then what happens in the story? Tommy, do you mind reading?
If I can see.
If you can't, Nancy, do you mind
It's not
reading?
a seeing. I don't have the new text yet. It didn't make it to Colorado.
Is it? Did it not come up, Elijah the prophet?
Now it's coming.
Okay.
Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance to the cave and said, "Who will inform Bar Yochai that the emperor died and his decree has been annulled?" Annulled. They emerged from the cave and saw people who were plowing and sowing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "Those people abandoned eternal life and it's very hard to read it, really, occupy themselves with temporary things. Every place that they directed their eyes was immediately burned."
Okay. So, well, stop. So what's happening is they come out, right? So the emperor dies, and they're like, oh, it's safe to come out. But who tells them it's safe to come out is supposedly Elijah the prophet, right? So from Eliyahu Hanavi.
Yeah.
And they come out and they see that people were occupying themselves with, like, plowing and sowing, like actually like working the land. And they're like scoffing at it. Like, this is ridiculous that this is what they do. So a divine voice emerged and said to them, "Did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? Return to your cave." They again went and sat there for 12 months. So God was like, whoa, you cannot criticize people for tilling the land and taking care of the world. And you can't destroy the world by just directing your eyes at stuff, because they were like looking at, so according to the story, this is like a myth, right? Like they were burning stuff just with their eyes. And so they said the judgment of wicked in Gehenna. Gehenna is like a kind of hell place in Judaism, although not really hell, but like it's like a pit, lasts for 12 months. A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Emerge from your cave." And they emerged. And everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal, because Rabbi Shimon learned his lesson. And Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, "My son, you and I suffice for the entire world." What does that mean, do you think? You and I suffice for the entire world. What do you think that means?
But it means something like that they were the models that everybody.
Yeah. They were the models, and they were doing enough for everybody else, right? That what they were doing was good in this world. And so the final story goes, Ed, you didn't have a problem reading the yellow, right? Yes, Tommy.
Isn't the word suffice also in the Haggadah, and it was enough?
Yeah.
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 Because they use it in the Haggadah in English, and it was enough.
Yeah, Dayenu.
Yeah. Dayenu, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Ed.
Did you ask me to read?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yep, no problem. As the sun was setting,
Oh, we lost you, Ed.
Mute. Okay. As the sun was setting on Shabbat Eve, they saw an elderly man who was holding 2 bundles of myrtle branches and running at twilight. They said to him, "Why do you have these?" He said to them, "In honor of Shabbat." They said to him, and let one suffice." He answered them, "One is corresponding to remember the Shabbat to keep it holy," from Shemot 20:18. And one is corresponding to observe the Shabbat day, and keep it holy, from Devarim 5:12. Rabbi Shimon said to his son, see how beloved the mitzvot are to Israel? Their minds were put at ease.
So what ends up happening? So after 13 years of being in a cave, they come out and there's a man that they run into. And what is he doing? He is preparing for Shabbat. And he has the branches so that he can light the Shabbat, what are similar to the Shabbat candles, right? One for keep the Sabbath day and keep it holy, and one for the observe the Shabbat, right? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, and one because of the observe, right? One remember and one observe. So light is important here, right? In the story. Now, fascinatingly enough, Shimon Bar Yochai is one of the most famous rabbis, and he is so famous that that the Kabbalists, the mystics, say that he was the one who created the Zohar, which is the most famous work for the Kabbalists in all of Jewish history and Jewish memory. And Lag BaOmer, there are those rabbis who say he was born on Lag BaOmer. There are those rabbis who say that he came out of the cave on Lag BaOmer. And there are those who say that he died on Lag BaOmer. But Lag BaOmer becomes a very extremely important day connected to him in a way that the bonfires, they say, are actually like a yahrzeit candle for him. That the bonfires are to light his light because he brought so much light to the world in his miracles, and therefore the light is staying on long enough and it is creating light even in dark times. And so what happens is that the miracles that even this story are remembered and he's celebrated. And so the largest bonfire celebration in the entire world every year happens at his tomb in Meron in Israel. And there's singing and there's dancing and there's just a huge bonfire. And I don't know how many of you have ever seen a Lag BaOmer bonfire, but in the United States, they're like nice little fires or fire pits or on the beach if you're in a beach area and everything. In Israel, like when I went to Mea Sharim, the bonfire was so tall, it was actually as tall as a two-story building, and it was burning down the lamppost in Mea Sharim because the fire was so, and they take beds and they take like furniture and they throw it on and they build it higher and higher and higher and higher. And it's an amazing sight to see, right? So if you ever want to see an amazing bonfire, I would highly recommend Israel during Lag BaOmer. It's although not during COVID-19.
Not this year.
Not this year. Not this year. Not this year. Yeah. So we have this story that tells us now, we have one story that says Lag BaOmer is about Rabbi Akiva and his 12,000 students. And then we have another story about one of Rabbi Akiva's new students, right, who came up right after the 12,000 pairs died, who ends up being this amazing, revered rabbi who had lived through this miracle of 13 years in a cave and is revered by many, many people around the world all the time. And therefore, Lag BaOmer is also for that reason. And then we have another story to read. Sandra, do you mind reading this text?
Oh, no problem. And more it appears to me that people do not marry between Pesach and Atzeret. This is because of the pain of the decrees, that the communities were killed in this entire kingdom.
So this text is actually referring to something completely different. This is not referring to Rabbi Akiva's, of the deaths of Rabbi Akiva, but it's actually referring to the deaths of the Crusades. So in 1099, the Crusades happened during the time of the Omer. And therefore, they say that it was rekindled, the idea of what the Omer was being celebrated for. That the memory is now not just because of Rabbi Akiva's students and the plague, and it is not just because of Yochai and his death, it is now also because of the Crusades and the Jewish memories. So when you add this layer, that this society and this community adds to their story in a holiday, what does that do to the holiday? When the holiday evolves in meaning, what does that do for us? Lori, I can't hear you.
Sorry. It's the importance level, maybe, seems more important.
So it elevates the importance to the people who are living through it, right? It elevates, what else does it elevate? It elevates the importance of remembering that experience, right?
Right.
So now it tells us that it's important to remember what happened to Rabbi Akiva's disciples. It's important to remember what happened to Yochai, Shimon bar Yochai. But it's also important to remember what now happened in the Crusades. So we're now adding another layer. So now let's add one more layer. Nancy, do you mind reading for us?
Sure.
Oh, Tommy, actually, let me take Tommy's question, then I'll have you.
Yeah, I have a question. Since they say this one went through the whole Atzeret, it means
Right.
I assume they're saying Shavuot.
Right, so because it went through the whole Omer period.
Yeah, so do they have the times that they don't break for Lag BaOmer for celebrating?
So there were some rabbis who said you should not break during Lag BaOmer, and some said you should break during Lag BaOmer, that it's still important to celebrate the good, right? And some people say it's like the joys and the oys of the world, right? So sometimes you have the joys and sometimes you have the oys. And that is part of what some people perceive it as is important and everything.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Nancy, go ahead.
Sure. Rabbi Akiva's students died, and due to our many sins, a number of communities were destroyed at the same time of year during the Crusades in Ashkenaz and in 1648 in Poland.
Okay, so now we have another story, right? So we know the Crusades because we know that from the last text. And now we add, and what happened in Poland in 1648? Who knows what happened in Poland in 1648? Does anybody? So, do you know, Ed?
I'm not sure. That was not during the Khmelnytsky or every
It
period.
was.
Oh, okay. I just didn't
Yeah.
remember exactly what year.
Yep. So Bogdan Khmelnytsky had the worst massacre of the Jewish people in the modern time until the Holocaust. About 600 to 800,000 Jews died within a matter of a year during the Khmelnytsky pogroms. And what happened is it was during the, it went through the time period of the Omer, and because it went through the time period of the Omer, now once again, the Omer is used not just to represent that which happened in the past, but now it's being used also to represent what is happening in the present. And so we have this evolution of our memory, of what we're supposed to remember, not just what we were supposed to remember back then, but what we're supposed to remember now. And interestingly enough, after the Holocaust happened, there was a major event during the Holocaust that occurred also during the Omer period. And so people add that also to the story of the Omer period and to Lag BaOmer. And that is the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising happened during Nisan. And because of that period, we are told to remember that as well when we're remembering Lag BaOmer. So the question in our last few minutes that we have, how is Lag BaOmer used to maintain collective memory? So that's the first question I have for you all, is how is Lag BaOmer used to maintain collective memory? And I'm going to close the PowerPoint and bring you all back. So how is it used to maintain collective Jewish memory?
Well, it reminds me of Tisha B'Av, which commemorates not only the two temples, but as I grow and I learn, I hear more and more terrible things happening in Hitler. And so it's piled up and piled up on one day. And then I also think about Purim, where we have personal Purims. And I know a family who went through a tragic, not a tragic, but near miss. And the the Purim of Saragossa is a very famous one, where if you go through a near miss, a catastrophic event, you are entitled to declare a personal Purim, and you use that on that day as either a community collective memory or a personal family remembrance, and that you have your personal Purim at that time. So we have that notion of piling on periods of history on a date or a period of time.
And why do that? Why take one period of time? Why not just say, okay, we're going to have lots of days for all of these things, right? Like, why does it have to be all of these things put together on one day? What does that do versus these individual moments and memories?
Well, it gives it more significance, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It absolutely gives it more significance. I agree 100%. Anything else?
I think there's more meaning. I mean, when you put a whole bunch of things together, it sort of builds one on top of the other.
It builds one on top of the other. So what I want to add in conclusion is we're during COVID-19 right now, right? We're during a time that honestly, it started right before Pesach, and we're going to be living in quarantine for the Omer, essentially, right? And who knows what will happen after the Omer, but the Omer, Shavuot is on the 28th of May. And it's really fascinating that once again, we are living through this time period of turmoil during the Omer, and we're given this cadence of life through the counting of the Omer, if you do count the Omer. And if you don't count the Omer, we at least have, we know that we're from Pesach until Shavuot and stuff. And the question is, how do we bring meaning to Lag BaOmer with our collective memory? Not in terms of like spirituality and everything. I'm really talking about collective memory in this instance, where we build our story, right? We use our own stories on top of this to layer, to give tradition and meaning to our children and our children's children and their children. Is this an instance where Lag BaOmer is remembered also for our COVID-19 experience, right? Is this part of that Jewish story and what it does? And one of the fascinating things about COVID-19 that it has done is it has created, in some ways, this renaissance of Jewish learning during this time period, because a lot of people are at home. They don't have as much to do, and so there's all these amazing classes and everything to take all of a sudden and to do, and there's this revival almost similar to like after Rabbi Akiva's students passed, and there was a revival of establishing this Torah again. So I think that can be how Lag BaOmer is used in our current state, and how we can continue building our memories and weave them into our lives, and so that our collective memory or our collective DNA is triggered. Go ahead, Susan.
There's two ways of doing this too. It's documenting it or making diary entries as it's happening, so that there's a current eyewitness event, and then it's how the history is written and how it was viewed later on in the future.
Beautiful.
And so documenting is really important, so that we have the account of what we went through, and everyone's account will probably be different.
Right.
If we have family members who are in a facility that we can't visit any longer, which I'm included in that grouping, I feel disconnected from my mother, but that's the challenge that we face right now. But what will it look like a year or 2, 3 or 5 years from now? It won't be as intense. We'll have that memory, but the documentation that we do now is really, I think, important, how we reflect on our feelings.
Absolutely. Any final statements or anything?
Well, I would also think the collective memory of all the events happening at this time as well. For me personally, it makes me think of a time of reflection, and which is what I've been doing during this whole quarantine period.
Very nice.
So it's a time to sort of pause and think about, what you want your life to look like going forward.
Right. And then Wonderful. Thank you. And I think I see Tommy and Lori as well.
Just to mention, Lag BaOmer is falling on Tuesday this year.
Yes, it is. It's May 11th through May 12th. Yes, absolutely. All right, Lori.
I think also what I've seen is just a resurgence of what is most important is being with families and having a lot more time, spending more time, having, you know, time to play with one another, you know, and sit down to dinner instead of running all around. So we're basically seeing simplifying life to what's most important. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and I wish you a wonderful Lag BaOmer and a Shavuot after that. We will be having a Lag BaOmer celebration through the community on May 12th. We're having a fun, like, short Lag BaOmer bonfire through Zoom, which sounds really funny, but it will be in front of my fire pit. And Keith will be shaving his beard that he's been growing since the start of the quarantine, which is so apropos to today's conversation of collective Jewish memory, of the combination of memory plus quarantine. We'll be having a picnic, and we will be also just enjoying a balloon shaving contest. So if you're interested in coming to that, please join us for that. And it was wonderful having all of you tonight with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Very
Thank you.
wonderful.
Take care.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.